What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's another crazy NFL Week 2, full of storylines. The biggest being the three massive comebacks by the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Cardinals, and almost a fourth by the Falcons trying to rid themselves of that 28-3 curse. They themselves found themselves down 28-3 and almost came back to beat the Rams. What a wild week it was. In this week's episode, we're going to look at fact or fiction on some of the NFL Week 2, I think, biggest overreactions to date. So the first one we're going to jump right in is Joe Burrow and the Bengals are suffering from the Super Bowl curse and they will miss the playoffs. Well, I'm going to start off right here. I think this one is fiction. Like the Bengals have lost two games very close, one in overtime, one in the last play of the game. In week one, they really should have won against the Steelers if it weren't for a couple of special teams mishaps with their long snapper being out and a couple botched snaps. Field goal gets blocked, missed field goal there with Evan McPherson. They really should have won that game in overtime or even in regulation against the Steelers. And they fought back after playing horribly all day and still almost beat the Steelers. Against the Cowboys, pretty bad. Cooper Rush is starting for the Cowboys. And yeah, the Cowboys came out hot on offense, scored, I think, 14 points, 17 points in the first half, but didn't do much offensively, save for that last drive and they kicked the field goal. But still, at the end of the day, the Bengals looked awful, and yet they were still in that game at the end of it. If it weren't for Cooper Rush taking the Cowboys right down the field and kicking the field goal with no time remaining, that game could have gone to overtime. The Bengals looked like they had the momentum in that one. I think some insight here or some context that's really important is Joe Burrow had his hernia surgery and he missed basically all of camp and all of preseason. He hasn't had a lot of time to practice. And look, I know we've talked a lot about how great these weapons are and how they've improved the offensive line, but look, this is at the end of the day, this is a team sport. And you got to build chemistry with your guys, and not being out there for practice has definitely hurt Burrow on the team, and he seems a step indecisive, a step slow. I mean, doesn't help he was playing against the vaunted Steelers defense first, and then he had to go against Micah Parsons and the Cowboys, who were breathing down his neck the entire game. I think it was just a bad couple matchups for the Bengals, and if you look around that division, they still have two relatively weak opponents in the Steelers and the Browns. I mean, neither of those teams I would expect are going to light the world on fire, especially with the Browns still with Brissett at quarterback for the first 11 games of the season. Now, the Ravens looked really good, but they're still only 1-1. So, even all that considered, Bengals are only a game back. They're fine. They'll be completely fine. I expect them to turn it around, and they'll make the playoffs by the end of the year. The second one, and Nathaniel Hackett. Was he a bad hire? And unfortunately, I'm going to have to go fact on this one. Nathaniel Hackett was absolutely atrocious in week one, and he was completely atrocious in week two as a coach. The Broncos have looked indecisive on offense. They don't seem to know what their identity is. Russell Wilson doesn't help, has looked awful through his first two games of the season, and maybe that's partly learning a new offense, but man, as a head coach, you have to figure out, you have to be decisive and you have to get plays in on time to your quarterback. And they had a number of delayed game penalties in the first game, a number of delayed game penalties in the second game. It's just inexcusable. Even that, add to that, the mismanagement he's had in a couple of drives. And in the first game, opting to kick a 64-yard field goal when you still had time left. Yes, I know it was 4th and 5, but a 64-yard field goal is iffy at best. And then in week two, they're playing the Texans, a team that's not supposed to be very good. And they are within field goal range and are deciding, I think it's like 4th and 2, and they're opting whether, hey, should we go for this, should we not? And so they're a little indecisive. They get the kicker out there a little bit late. And then they don't get the snap off. And for whatever reason, Nathaniel Hackett declines to call a timeout. They take the delay of game penalty, which pushes them out of field goal range in a game that they were losing by 3, 9-6 at the time. And they end up punting the ball. So, inexcusable. The head coach basically threw away 3 points. I mean, in the NFL, you cannot throw away points like that. McManus, The 50-yard field goal, I think it was, sure, still would have been long, but come on, it's the NFL. You cannot afford to just hand away points like that. And maybe you can get away with it against the Texans, but when you play much better teams down the line, that's not going to cut it. And like I think Nathaniel Hackett's even admitted he's been bad. He's got to be better. Right now, this looks like an awful hire, and look, it's 2 games in, and he has a chance to redeem himself a bit. But as of right now, the Broncos look like they got an absolute dud as a head coach, and they've got to figure out how to turn it around to own up for their mistakes and figure it out. The third big overreaction for NFL Week 2 is that the Bills are the absolute favorites in the AFC. And look, I like the Chiefs as much as anybody, and I think the Chiefs are right up there with them. But I think it's fair to say that while I don't think the Bills are the prohibitive favorites, they should be the favorites up there with the Chiefs, if not maybe slightly above the Chiefs. If you look at their first 2 games, the Bills played 2 teams that made the playoffs last year in the Rams and Titans, and their margin of victory was 21 against the Rams and 34 against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, they utterly dominated that football game yesterday. It wasn't even close. The Titans looked like they were not even on the same like level as the Bills. It was like you were looking at a college football team playing an NFL team. That Bills just went out there and dominated. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs put on a show. That defense has been absolutely impenetrable. What's crazy is that it's been on both sides of the ball thus far. Their offense has scored 31 plus points in both games. They scored 31 in the opener, 41 in the second game, and really they could have scored more in either of those. They just kind of let off the gas quite a bit, and their defense allowed less than 10 points in both of those games. They gave up 10 to the Rams and 7 to the Titans. I mean, it's utter domination across the board. And look, even if you view the Chiefs and you value Patrick Mahomes' experience, I mean, it's hard to say that the Bills shouldn't be the favorites in the AFC. They probably should be the favorite across the NFL to win the Super Bowl right now. I mean, this team has looked dominant. Josh Allen's looked as good as ever. I think the big concern, though, with the Bills is that their inability to run the football. I mean, they just kind of seem to be reluctant to run whatsoever. Josh Allen has been, over the last couple of years, like they're just about their leading rusher, and even against the Titans when they're up by 30 plus, they're still throwing it, and they don't really have that ground game. So that's the one maybe flaw that they have. But otherwise, I mean, this team has looked absolutely incredible. So I think they're definitely a team to watch. They should be the favorite for the Super Bowl, and we'll see how they proceed. I think it'll be fun to watch them down the stretch. All right, moving on. So there's some big news over the weekend. Trey Lance I think he fractures his ankle in the first or second drive for the Niners. Jimmy G comes in right after they've been trying to trade him all summer. Nobody wants him. He re-signs as a backup. Now Jimmy G comes in, leads the team to a 27-7 victory. And look, the overreaction here is, are the Niners a better team with Jimmy G? And I think I have to say fiction on this one. Look, the Niners will win lots of regular season games with Jimmy G. I think he's something like now 34-16 as a starter. And Jimmy G will win you regular season games. But that's not why the Niners switched to Trey Lance. The Niners switched to Trey Lance because come playoffs, Jimmy G was never the best quarterback on the field. Look, he's a good game manager. Kyle Shanahan's a wizard on offense. But come playoff time, you need a quarterback that can take over. He doesn't need to win you every game, but he needs to have the ability to win you some games. And truth be told, is Jimmy G couldn't do that. He's played, I think, 6 playoff games, and has he once been the better quarterback? No. And Trey Lance's upside, I think, is what you really to look for here. Yes, he was raw, and maybe he wasn't as good right now as Jimmy G, but that's not what you're going for if you're the Niners. You're playing the long game. This team has been really good for several years now. They went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago, or 3 years ago now. They went to the NFC Championship game last year. This team is uber talented. They have the defense. They have Deebo Samuel. They have decent running backs, good offensive line. They really needed that quarterback to put them over the top. And Trey Lance, was he that guy? I don't know. But he definitely had more upside than Jimmy G. So I think Look, in the grand scheme of things, this Trey Lance injury was one of the worst things that could have happened to the Niners. Jimmy G, yes, will be good, but their ceiling is very limited. And so if you're the Niners, you have to hope that Trey Lance can come into camp next year ready to go and can develop a little bit more and maybe take the steps in year number three. But unfortunate to see Lance go out. He had a promising potential year this year. He was finally had the reins, had the opportunity to take over this team, and now he's out for the year. Had surgery and he's done. The last one, I think this is a pretty interesting team. The last one is the Lions are a sleeper playoff team. So fact or fiction on that one. I'm gonna have to go fact. Look, the Lions have looked really competitive in the Dan Campbell era. I know last year their record didn't reflect that, but they were in a lot of games. And in this year, their offense has been otherworldly. They've scored 35, believe it or not, they've scored 35 plus points in both games. I think it was 35 and 36 in their two games. They beat the Commanders, and look, the Commanders aren't going to be mistaken for the Bills or anything like that, but it's still a decent team. And the Lions look like they're just playing with a lot of hunger. They clearly love playing for Dan Campbell. The offense has figured it out with all their weapons. I mean, Jared Goff is a serviceable NFL quarterback, but you surround him with tons of talent like he had in LA. And look, this guy can succeed with really good talent around him. He's got a star running back in DeAndre Swift, similar to the Todd Gurley he had back with the Rams. He's got a great number one receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown. TJ Hawkinson, a solid tight end option. I mean, he's got guys all across the board, and they seem potent, they seem prepared, and they seem ready to leave their mark on the NFL this season. Not only that, but because they were finished so poorly last year, they had to have a relatively easy schedule this year. They get to play the likes of the Jets. The I think the Giants are on the schedule as well. They get the Jaguars. They get a lot of teams that aren't seen as maybe the top tier playoff contenders this year. So it's a relatively easy schedule. The division is a little weak with the Bears not looking so great, at least on offense. Still trying to figure that one out. The Packers maybe a little bit weakened. I know they just had a big game on Sunday Night Football, but the Packers don't have the weapons that they've had historically. So is that defense or is that offense going to take a step back? And the Vikings are the Vikings. If you catch them, everybody knows if you catch them on a primetime game, Kirk Cousins is going to remind you that he's not the same quarterback under the bright lights. So I think this Lions team, they're young. They've got stars and Swift, St. Brown, Aiden Hutchinson came to play in that game, and it's just absolutely relentless. I think this team has a real shot to make the playoffs, and I think they're definitely a sleeper playoff team. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this week of the NFL season as much as I did. If you like this video, I'd love for your support. So feel free to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the NFL. Any topics you'd like to see me cover in the future. Thank you guys for the time. Hope you enjoyed it.